Christmas morning had always meant something different to me: quiet, reflection, a moment to pause the rush of the world. But that year, it felt more like a production, a poorly scripted play performed in my own living room. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm amber glow across the carefully decorated space Mira had insisted we holiday-proof. Every garland, every snow-dusted candle had been chosen with meticulous intent, as if aesthetics could overwrite the rot festering beneath the surface. I sat beside her on the plush cream love seat, pretending the cushion between us wasn't weighted with the ghosts of everything we hadn't said in months. Her family had descended on us early, like a seasonal storm. Iris, Myra's mother, filled every inch of air with sharp-tongued commentary about the drapes, the roast, the way I tied my tie. Gerald, her father, held a glass of scotch like a scepter, smirking at me like he'd won something I wasn't aware we were competing for. Talia and Zara floated around like they owned the place, dropping gifts and snide remarks with the same effortless entitlement. They'd never really seen me as family, only as the man who carried bags, fetched coats, and stayed conveniently quiet. But I wasn't quiet anymore. Not inside. Not in the way that mattered. I had spent months watching, listening, preparing. And today, on the day they thought they were burying me beneath the weight of their collective smugness, I was going to give them a memory they'd never forget. They just didn't know it yet. "Merry Christmas," Mira said, her voice syrupy sweet as she handed me a red envelope. Her nails were painted crimson, a match to her lipstick, both of which drew eyes away from the coldness in her gaze. Her smile stretched just wide enough to look convincing to the camera one of her cousins was holding up, recording the moment for posterity. The room buzzed with champagne bubbles and carefully choreographed laughter. It was all noise. Meaningless, polished noise. I took the envelope with steady hands. I already knew what was inside. Knew because I'd seen the draft on our shared printer tray 2 weeks ago before she'd quickly pulled it away and claimed it was just a contract for a friend. I hadn't said anything then. Just nodded. Smiled. Memorized the watermark. When she slid it into my palm this time, there was no hesitation in her movements. That alone confirmed what I'd known for weeks. She wanted to humiliate me. Publicly. With flair. I peeled the flap open slowly, letting the crimson paper fall away like shed skin. Inside were several sheets, legal language, courthouse stamps, her signature neatly inked in blue. Divorce papers. Served not by a stranger in a quiet office, but by the woman I'd built a life with, surrounded by the people who had always rooted for our end. The moment I held them up and let my eyes scan the header, the room erupted. Cheers. Full-blown clapping. Like I had just been awarded some ironic participation trophy. Gerald raised his glass in a mock toast. Talia leaned into Myra's shoulder, laughing into her curls. Zara snapped a photo, yes, a photo, while Iris actually dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue, not out of sorrow, but the kind of theatrical satisfaction that people reserve for movie endings. I didn't say a word. I didn't flinch. That was the part that caught them off guard. They expected me to explode, to break, to stammer. Mira had probably rehearsed that scenario in her mind 100 times, me sputtering, her victorious, her family circling her like protective lions. But instead, I sat perfectly still. I looked at the papers, then looked at her, my gaze steady, unshaken. She seemed confused by my stillness, her smile faltering just a fraction, enough for me to see it. That first crack. She leaned in just a touch, voice lower this time, probably for dramatic effect. "You always hated surprises, didn't you, Jonah?" I gave her a small smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that says I see you and I'm not playing your game anymore. I didn't speak yet. I let the silence linger. Let it stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable. That's the thing about people like Mira. They thrive on spectacle. But silence? That unsettles them. Cousins shifted in their seats. The camera phone lowered slightly. Even Gerald's chuckle softened to a confused throat clear. They had no idea what I had been preparing. No idea what kind of man I'd become when pushed far enough. For the longest time, I had thought being good meant being accommodating. That a man should protect peace, even at his own expense. But peace without dignity? That's just surrender. And I'd surrendered too long. I folded the papers neatly and slid them back into the envelope. I looked around the room, slowly meeting the eyes of each person who had clapped when I was handed that red envelope like it was a trophy. I wanted them to remember this moment, not because they had won, but because they were about to lose something much greater. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice even and clear. "It's thoughtful." Mira tilted her head. "You're taking this. Well?" I leaned back and rested my arm behind her shoulders, my voice dropping low enough that only she could hear me. You should have asked yourself why. For a moment, just a flicker, I saw it, the doubt, the flicker of confusion behind her eyes. She didn't know what I meant yet, but she would. They all would. I glanced at the tree, its lights blinking softly like a countdown. Everything was wrapped perfectly, or so they thought. But there was still one box left under the tree, white with gold trim, small and heavy, tucked beneath the lowest branch, hidden just enough to be overlooked. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't forgiveness. It was the truth, neatly tied in a bow. And I couldn't wait to watch her unwrap it. Gerald raised his glass like he was christening a yacht. To new beginnings, he announced, scotch sloshing slightly over the rim. His voice boomed, thick with satisfaction and arrogance, the way only men who've never truly been challenged tend to sound. Around the room, laughter erupted again, this time more confident, more unrestrained. They thought the curtain had fallen, that the scene had ended with my silent defeat. Talia clinked her mimosa against Myra's flute, leaning in with a wink that reeked of conspiracy. Zara pulled her phone back up and recorded with glee, angling the lens to capture my face, probably hoping to freeze a moment of shock or devastation. I didn't give her one. I didn't move. The bubbles in my champagne glass kept rising undisturbed. My fingers stayed wrapped around the stem, cool and steady. I just watched them. Let them bask. Let them indulge in their performance. Mira leaned slightly toward me, her body language relaxed, her expression smug in that way she only wore when she believed she was 10 steps ahead. You always hated surprises, didn't you, Jonah? She said lightly, her tone playfully cruel, rehearsed like the final punchline of a sitcom. The room chuckled in agreement, as if we were all in on the joke. But I wasn't laughing. Not because I was angry. Not because I was broken. But because I was certain. I knew exactly what this was. A group execution. Public humiliation. They wanted a scene, a meltdown, an outburst, something they could point to and say, see? That's why she left him. But I didn't give them one. Because I'm not the kind of man who makes scenes. I make plans. I'd seen this play before. Not the exact one, but the themes were familiar. The plotting behind closed doors, the whispers just a little too quiet, the glances that lasted a second too long. And then, the big reveal, wrapped in tinsel and glassware. Only they didn't know that while they rehearsed their little betrayal, I had been doing some scripting of my own. Months of it. Patience is a kind of power. Most people don't realize that. They confuse stillness for weakness. But pressure builds in silence. And when it finally breaks through, it does so with purpose. So I lifted my glass. Not to toast, but to observe. My reflection stared back from the champagne surface. A man in a clean white shirt, charcoal sweater, groomed beard. Calm. Unbothered. Because I had already made peace with what was happening. They thought this was the climax, the high note. They didn't know they were still in the first act. I took a slow sip and turned toward Gerald, the self-appointed king of the moment. That's quite a speech, I said evenly. You ever consider theater? He chuckled, assuming I was being facetious. No need. Life's more entertaining. Talia giggled and Mira chimed in. Come on, Jonah, don't be such a buzzkill. Let's not make this awkward. The irony in her voice practically dripped off her tongue, like she believed she was being merciful, granting me some dignified exit in exchange for my silence. I looked at her long and hard, letting the weight of my gaze rest on her until she started to shift in her seat. You're right, I said finally. Let's not make this awkward. Mira blinked, just once. Subtle, but it was the first sign she realized something wasn't adding up. You know, I continued, letting my voice warm just a little. Christmas is all about giving. Generosity. Surprises. I turned back to the fireplace and nodded slightly, where the camera from earlier still blinked, still rolling. And I've always believed that what you give says a lot about who you are. God. Here we go, Zara muttered from across the room. Let him talk, Gerald said, not out of kindness, but out of amusement. He still thought I was spiraling. Let the man talk, he's finally cracking. That's what he was thinking. And that's exactly what I wanted him to think. Mira crossed her legs, then uncrossed them. Her fingers drummed lightly on her champagne flute. I could almost hear the gears turning behind her eyes. She was trying to figure out if I was bluffing, trying to remember if she had missed something. Spoiler, she had. I turned my head toward her, keeping my tone light. You handed me a red envelope with divorce papers, Mira, in front of your entire family, on Christmas morning. And while I admit, that's bold, it's not exactly elegant. A few snickers broke out. Mostly from the younger cousins, the ones who lived for drama and probably thought they'd just witnessed a Hallmark villain origin story. But then I saw it again, that flicker of doubt in Myra's eyes. She knew me. She knew I didn't move unless I had somewhere to land. And I hadn't moved yet. So she smiled again, tighter this time. Well, Jonah, you always did prefer clean breaks. I nodded. True. But I also prefer context. And then I stood. No one expected it. Zara lowered her phone. Gerald raised an eyebrow. Mira tensed. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't slam anything. I simply placed my champagne glass on the side table and straightened my sweater like a man preparing to make a presentation. There's something you all should know, I began. Something Mira forgot to mention while she was choreographing this little holiday performance. My hands were loose by my sides. No notes. No paper. Just certainty. See, when someone tries to end a marriage like this, it usually means they believe they've already won, that they've planned everything, that the timing is theirs to control. Mira stood up beside me, trying to laugh it off. Jonah, stop. Don't do this. Not here. Why not? I asked, still not looking at her. You picked the time, the place, the audience. Gerald's tone darkened. What's going on here? I turned to him. What's going on is that I didn't come to this party empty-handed. That's when Myra's eyes widened. I leaned down, picked up a small gift box from under the tree, white, gold-ribboned, unnoticed until now, and held it in my palm. This is for you, I said, handing it to her. And then I smiled. Merry Christmas, Mira. The room hushed. The laughter had died. Champagne fizzed in the silence. Because this time, the surprise was mine, and they wouldn't be clapping when they opened it. I have a gift for you too, I said, keeping my voice smooth, deliberate, like I hadn't just been ambushed in my own home. Myra's eyebrows arched slightly, amused. She leaned back, the kind of lean a poker player does when they think they've already won the hand and want to see you bluff. Really? She asked, her voice tinged with mock surprise, that same performative sweetness she'd worn all morning like a new perfume. Her sister snickered, not even trying to hide it anymore. Gerald was back in his scotch, already disinterested in whatever desperate last-ditch effort he assumed I was making. But Mira? She was still watching me because she knew I didn't give gifts lightly, especially not after what she'd just done. I walked slowly to the tree. The laughter had faded into murmurs, fizzled into the flickering sound of the fire licking at the logs. The room, seconds ago full of gloating and noise, now waited, half expectant, half confused. Even the younger cousins, who had been busy scrolling or texting, paused to watch. I bent down and pulled out the box that had been resting quietly under the bottom branch, tucked beside a silver-wrapped package from Iris. It wasn't large, but it was weighted, dense, intentional, white with gold trim, a perfect little square, clean corners, a satin ribbon tied not with love but precision. I turned and walked back to Mira, holding the box in my hand like it weighed nothing. But inside, it carried more than any gift she could have imagined. She held her hand out almost lazily, but I noticed the slight tremor in her fingers as I placed the box into her palm. A shift. Subtle. But there. Her eyes lingered on it longer than she meant them to, studying it. Maybe she thought it was jewelry. That's what her sisters would have assumed. Some misguided olive branch, a diamond apology, a pathetic plea to reconsider. Maybe she thought I was trying to save face, to soften the blow she'd just landed. I watched her fingers move slowly. She untied the ribbon like it was sacred, her practiced hands suddenly unsure. The box opened with the faintest creak. First came the tissue paper, then the item beneath. Her brows knit together in confusion. It wasn't a necklace, or a ring, or even a note of forgiveness. It was a USB drive, plain, black, unmarked, and beneath it, a folded document with a notary seal. She pulled the paper out with one hand, holding the drive in the other. Her posture changed, no longer smug or triumphant, but frozen in that quiet sort of dread people feel when they open something they wish they hadn't. The notary seal glinted slightly under the overhead light as she unfolded the sheet. She tilted her head, her lips parting to form a question, but nothing came out. Not yet. I said nothing. She scanned the document. Her eyes darted across the words, her mouth moving slightly as she read, line by line, clause by clause. I waited. It wouldn't take long. Just a few seconds to get to the good part. And there it was. Her jaw stiffened. Her breath caught. Jonah, what is this? Her voice cracked slightly. I took a step closer. Just enough for her to hear me clearly, but not close enough to be intimate. Keep reading, I said. The air shifted. I could feel the energy in the room start to pull tight like the slow winding of a string. The conversations around us had gone quiet. Iris glanced over, narrowing her eyes. Gerald straightened up. Zara and Talia leaned forward like they were watching the next twist in a show they thought they already knew the ending to. Myra's fingers gripped the paper tighter. I could see her pulse ticking at her neck. Her lips moved faster now, reading, rereading, trying to make sense of what she was holding. The silence stretched, long and tense, until it snapped with 3 words. "You can't. This isn't legal." Her voice was sharper now, louder, cutting through the murmurs and dragging everyone's attention fully to us. I didn't flinch. "Actually," I said calmly, "it is." She looked at me like I had just confessed to murder in the middle of church. "You forged this," she hissed. "You had to." "No," I nodded toward the bottom of the page. "Your signature. Witnessed. Notarized. Dated. A month ago." Her hand trembled slightly as she looked down again. "I never signed this." "You did," I said. "You were just in too much of a rush to read what you were signing." She blinked at me, and I saw the panic bloom behind her eyes. That growing realization that she'd been outmaneuvered. I had spent months letting her think she was the mastermind. Let her believe I was distracted, docile, domesticated. I was none of those things. I had been preparing. "What did I sign?" she asked, breath shallow now. I leaned in slightly, my voice low. "A transfer of ownership. Of the house. The cars. The business accounts." Myra's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked like a woman who'd been handed a grenade she thought was a snow globe. I turned back to the room and lifted the document for all to see. If anyone's curious, this is a legal instrument Mira willingly signed. It gives me full ownership of all shared assets. It went into effect yesterday. I paused. "Merry Christmas, everyone." Gasps. Audible gasps. A few muttered, "What the hell's," from the corner. Iris stood halfway up, wine glass trembling in her hand. Gerald furrowed his brows and looked at Mira like she had just dragged his reputation through the mud. Zara's mouth hung open. Talia looked like someone had poured cold water down her back. Mira, meanwhile, still hadn't moved. She just stood there, staring at the paper like it was going to catch fire in her hands. "This is a joke," she said finally, but it sounded more like a hope than a conviction. "It's not," I replied, plucking the USB drive gently from her hand. "But if you'd like to understand the rest, you might want to watch this." And I turned to the TV. Because the performance wasn't over. It was just getting started. Mira stood frozen, the notarized document still clutched in her hand, the pristine Christmas decor around her suddenly feeling like a garish stage set. All the red and gold, the lights twinkling cheerfully from the tree, now looked ridiculous under the weight of what she was holding. Her hand hovered slightly in the air, as if letting go of the paper might reverse time and undo everything. But I wasn't giving her that luxury. Not today. I walked to the entertainment console, retrieved the remote, and switched on the TV mounted above the fireplace. The screen flared to life, casting a cool glow across the faces that had, just minutes ago, been contorted in smug laughter. The mood had shifted completely now. No more jokes, no raised glasses, no winks or clinks or whispered insults disguised as compliments. Now there was silence. Pure, electric silence. Mira hadn't moved, but I could see her thoughts scrambling, crashing into each other behind her eyes as she tried to calculate the extent of what was happening. The document had already gutted her certainty. The USB drive was about to bury it. On screen, the footage began to play. No dramatic music. No build-up. Just cold, clinical video from the security Kim installed in the conference room of our shared office. She didn't know I'd upgraded the system 3 months ago. Motion-activated audio recording. High-res visuals. Timestamped, watermarked, backed up to a cloud drive she didn't even know existed. The image was clear as day, Mira, seated across from Kenji Morales, our accountant, and, unbeknownst to her, the newest witness in a very thorough case. In the video, Kenji slid a folder across the table toward her. Mira picked it up, flipping through the pages without hesitation. She looked calm, almost too casual, like this was routine. Her voice was crystal clear when she spoke. "Once Jonas signs that loan," she said, "we'll drain the account. Split it. He won't know what hit him." Gasps rippled through the room. Her sisters looked like they'd seen a ghost. One of the cousins whispered, "No way." Iris was stiff, her lips parted, her glass untouched. Gerald turned his head sharply toward his daughter, eyes narrowing with a mixture of disbelief and growing fury. I didn't look at any of them. I kept my gaze on Mira, who stared at the screen like it might implode. Her body was still, but I could see her pulse beating wildly in her neck, her breath quickening, shallow and erratic. Her mouth moved slightly, tiny, involuntary motions like she was trying to find words that weren't there. She stepped forward suddenly, reaching for the remote in my hand. "Turn it off," she hissed. This isn't what it looks like." I didn't move. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I replied. "It's just the part you thought no one would ever see." The video kept rolling. Kenji laughed in the footage, low and cocky, the way a man laughs when he thinks he's untouchable. "He's too soft," he said. "Too loyal. You're lucky he doesn't know how to fight dirty." On cue, I paused the video. The room was holding its breath. Myra's eyes were wide now, her pupils dilated, her face paler than I'd ever seen it. The Mira I knew, the one who orchestrated dinner parties like military campaigns, who polished her voice and posture before every meeting, who never walked into a room without planning how to own it, was gone. What stood in front of me now was someone cornered, stripped of her script. You can't use this," she said, her voice cracking. "This was a private conversation." "No," I said calmly. "This was a business meeting, in our shared space. Recorded legally, stored securely. And Kenji already signed the release." Her face twisted at his name. "You talked to him?" I nodded once. "Weeks ago. He didn't take much convincing. Turns out, he had a lot more to lose than I did. Tax fraud, embezzlement, forged ledgers. He rolled on you so fast, Mira, I almost felt bad." The lie slipped from my lips without remorse. Kenji hadn't folded easily. It took pressure, evidence, and the threat of losing his license. But the effect was the same. He turned, and he gave me everything I needed. Myra's hand went at her mouth, her nails digging into her lower lip. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. "You planned this." "Carefully," I said, "while you were planning your exit." Zara finally found her voice. "Wait, are you saying all of this, what she signed, was real? She gave you everything?" "She didn't even read it," I said. "She thought she was signing paperwork to clear me for a business loan. Kenji forged the front page. I replaced it with the real transfer. And she signed it in front of a notary." Gerald exploded. "You're telling me you used my daughter's stupidity against her? That's low, Jonah. Even for you." I turned to him, steady. "No, Gerald. I used the truth. Something none of you seem to be familiar with." Myra's voice cracked open like a shattered mirror. "You can't do this to me." "I didn't do this to you, Mira," I said. "You did this to yourself. I just gave you the mirror." She tried to steady herself, squaring her shoulders, but the shaking in her hands gave her away. The room was no longer hers. The attention she had demanded earlier was now her burden. All eyes were on her, but this time they weren't cheering. They were watching a downfall, live and raw and irreversible. She turned to Iris for support, but her mother didn't say a word. Her mouth was tight, her jaw clenched. Whatever sympathy she might have had was buried beneath the weight of embarrassment and rage. Gerald sat back down, his scotch untouched. Even the cousins had gone quiet, phones lowered, faces pale. Mira looked back at me with tear-glazed eyes. "You set me up." "No," I said softly. "I just stopped pretending I didn't know who you really were." And with that, I pressed play again. Because the worst wasn't over yet. The room went silent, not just quiet, silent. The kind of silence that vibrates in your chest like an aftershock. Myra's face was pale, and her hands had dropped to her sides, the folded document limp in one and her expression frozen in a half scowl, half confusion. It was the silence of a spell breaking, of performance crashing against reality. Her family didn't know what to do with it. They'd never seen her like this. And they'd sure as hell never seen me like this. Her father's voice came first, sharp and barked. "What's going on?" I turned to face them, no longer trying to hide anything, not my voice, not my stare, not the truth that had been coiling beneath my skin for months. I stepped into the middle of the living room, right between the Christmas tree and the coffee table still cluttered with gift wrap and half-empty flutes. Mira stood off to the side, visibly shrinking by the second. I didn't rush. I let the pause drag. Because now it was my show, and they were finally my audience. "It's a transfer of ownership," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The calm made it heavier, more believable. "As of yesterday, this house, the vehicles, and our shared business accounts are now solely under my name." Zara scoffed. "You're lying." "No. I'm prepared," I corrected. Iris gasped, but it was a quiet sound, like someone choking on a realization they didn't want to accept. Gerald sat forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped like a man trying to hold the last strands of order in his family. Mira looked like she wanted to scream again, but she couldn't find the air. She kept blinking, like that would change the words I'd just spoken. I turned slightly toward her. You signed it, Mira. You trusted Kenji to bury the fine print. He didn't. Gerald's face turned red, veins pulsing along his temple. That's ridiculous. You expect us to believe she just handed it all over like a fool? I nodded to the TV. Look at the video, I said. I didn't shout. Didn't gloat. Just pressed play again. The screen flickered, shifting from the previous footage to a new clip. Timestamped, dated, clean as evidence gets. This one was audio forward, tighter on the angle. It captured Mira and Kenji seated across from each other again, this time with a contract between them and a pen in her hand. Her voice was unmistakable. You're sure this will look like loan paperwork? Kenji's reply came without hesitation. Absolutely. He won't read it. He never does. That stung, even now. She hadn't just cheated me. She'd undervalued me. Thought I was stupid, passive, predictable. And she wasn't alone. The look on her father's face morphed from fury to something I hadn't seen from him before, disgust. Not at me. At her. You forged his name? He asked. No, I said before she could speak. She didn't need to. She used her own. She signed everything. All I had to do was swap the first page with the real contract. The rest of it, the legalese, the witnesses, the dates were already there. I looked at Mira now, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what I'd see. You let your ambition blind you to the obvious. You were so sure I wasn't paying attention. Her face cracked, just for a second. A tremble in her jaw, her lips pressed too tightly together. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. She wasn't crying because she was hurt. She was unraveling because she'd lost control. This was a woman who operated best when she was orchestrating. And now she was standing in the middle of her own collapse with no script in her hand. The TV kept playing, but I muted it. The audio had done its job. The visual was now just background noise. I turned to Gerald. You wanted to know what's going on? Your daughter conspired to gut our business, siphon joint funds, and walk away with a smile while I stood here with a red envelope and a broken marriage. You should have come to me, he muttered. I raised an eyebrow. So you could applaud her more discreetly? He said nothing. I moved my eyes across the room. Iris wouldn't meet my gaze. Zara looked like she wanted to bolt. Talia was shaking her head in disbelief. I didn't bring this forward to destroy anyone, I said. I brought it forward because I was done being the quiet one, the reliable one, the fool. I looked directly at Mira again. You wanted me humiliated. You wanted to ruin me in front of your family. Merry Christmas, Mira. Here we are. She finally spoke, her voice brittle. Jonah, this is revenge. No, I replied. This is documentation. I pulled the final piece out of my pocket, the audit report. Crisp, stapled, with every account Mira thought she could drain listed in detailed transactions. Every dollar, every timestamp, every digital fingerprint. The room might not have understood what they were looking at, but Mira did. Her knees slightly buckled when she saw the front page. I handed it to her without venom. Just held it out. You don't get to play the victim now, I told her. You wrote the story. I just published it. Talia finally muttered. This is insane. No, I said. This is clarity. You've all looked at me like I was just furniture in this house. Like I was lucky to orbit Myra's world. But I was the one building the foundation while you all watched your reflections in the windows. A long pause. Then Gerald stood and walked toward the door without a word. Iris followed him like a wind-up toy. No eye contact. No defense. They just left. One by one. The cousins made excuses, gathered coats, and disappeared. No one asked for the rest of the video. No one dared. Zara looked stunned as she grabbed her purse, saying only, wow, under her breath before slipping out like a ghost. Talia lingered longer, her face unreadable, but eventually she too walked out, leaving Mira standing alone. The room was half empty now, like a theater after a final act no one applauded. Mira opened her mouth again, but I raised a hand. I'm not done, I said. But we are. Then I turned toward the hallway, because I had one more gift to deliver and one more goodbye to give. And this time, I would choose the exit. I didn't go far. Just a few steps toward the console again, remote still warm in my hand. The TV was muted now. Its screen paused on an image of Mira and Kenji in that quiet office, both of them grinning like they'd cracked some impossible code. But the real footage, The one Gerald needed to see hadn't played yet. Not the part that cut through more than just marriage vows. The part that ripped into the illusion of loyalty Mira had paraded around for years, especially to her father. I glanced over my shoulder. Gerald had paused by the door, one hand on the knob, but something had rooted him there. Maybe it was pride. Maybe curiosity. Or maybe it was the dawning realization that his daughter had orchestrated this deception in the name of ambition and self-preservation, not love. Whatever it was, I welcomed it. Wait, I said, turning the volume back on. You might want to see this next part, Gerald. Myra's eyes shot to the screen. Jonah, don't, she started, but I didn't even look at her. I just hit play. The room refroze, like someone had dropped the temperature. On screen, the hotel security footage began. Clear as day. Mira and Kenji entering the downtown Marriott. Their hands brushed as they passed through the lobby. He reached for the small of her back as they entered the elevator. Nothing explicit. Nothing that could be explained away, either. The timestamp showed it all. Midday meetings, overnight stays, checkouts in the morning while I was managing our business operations, while I was signing off on payroll and project timelines, while I was building what they planned to steal. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Gerald's expression did the work for me. His lips parted, then closed, then parted again like he was trying to catch the right emotion before it slipped out. The rest of the room was still, stunned into full awareness. Mira had backed herself into the edge of the fireplace, gripping the mantle like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face had gone a strange shade, gray at the edges, drained of the fire that once animated her expressions. The video played on. Kenji and Mira walking down the hallway of the hotel, laughing, relaxed, their hands locked together now like they were on vacation. Then the image shifted, night vision inside the hallway, them exiting the room the next morning. Myra's hair was pulled back in a loose bun. She wore one of his jackets. Her mother gasped, and it was real this time. Sharp. Small. Her hand flew to her mouth, fingers trembling. Iris's pearls, those precious things she wore to every event, jiggled as her chest rose and fell with stunned breaths. Oh my God, she whispered. Gerald didn't move. I muted the TV again. Then I turned to Mira, slowly, as if I had all the time in the world. You wanted a performance, I said, voice steady. You made me the villain before I even knew there was a script. You painted me out as unambitious, slow, boring. But I wasn't the one sneaking into hotels while lying to everyone's face. She was trembling now, visibly, like every nerve in her body had decided to betray her at once. Gerald took a step forward. You embarrassed this family, he said, and his voice was low but full of venom, the kind he usually saved for me. In front of everyone. In front of clients. Friends. You used our business to fund your affair. Mira opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Just a shuddered breath. I trusted you. Gerald continued, voice rising now. I defended you. Against him. Against anyone who doubted your loyalty. And this, he pointed at the paused screen. This is what you were doing with our accounts. I let the words hang. Let the accusation linger without defense. I wanted her to understand the fullness of it, the totality. This wasn't just a marriage imploding. This was a legacy, a business, a name she had pulled through the gutter. And I had the receipts. I walked over to the side table and retrieved a small folder. Not the audit. Not the contract. This one was newer, printed the night before, hot off the email chain from my lawyer. I handed it to Gerald without saying anything. He looked down, flipping through the pages with tense fingers. This, I finally said, is the compiled report. It's been submitted to the board. The embezzlement, the fraud, the unauthorized wire transfers. Myra's name is on every transaction. Kenji's too. They've both been reported. His eyes snapped up. The board knows. They do now, I answered. Renee sent it last night. The vote to remove Mira as partner is scheduled for next week, but I've already got the majority. I turned to Mira. You said I never knew how to fight dirty. You were wrong. I just prefer not to. But when the gloves come off, I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough that only she could hear. I don't swing to Bruce. I swing to end it. She flinched. Her father's voice cut in again, quieter now, but more lethal. You're out. You hear me? Done. Dada. Mira finally croaked, her voice weak, but Gerald cut her off with a raised hand. No, he snapped. You used your position, our money, our trust, to fund your betrayal. You think I care about your divorce? You've compromised everything. The room stayed painfully quiet for another beat. The only sound was the faint whir of the heater kicking in and the soft tick of the wall clock. And then I broke the moment. I turned to Zara, who had been lurking by the doorway, probably trying to find an angle to slip out unnoticed. "By the way," I said, calm as ever, "the car you're driving? The Lexus? It's registered in my name." Her eyes widened, offended and confused. "Excuse me. You used my card to put down the deposit. Mira authorized it without consulting me. I transferred ownership back yesterday. The keys won't start it anymore without reprogramming." Zara blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "You might want to Uber." A few scattered gasps rippled again, but I was already walking back toward the fireplace, placing the remote down gently, the footage still paused on Myra's smiling, grainy face. "Let's keep watching," I said, not for drama, but for clarity. There's still more to see. And this time, no one told me to stop. The silence that followed my last sentence wasn't hollow, it was loaded. Like everyone in that room had stepped onto ice they never realized was cracking beneath their feet. The TV screen still glowed with the paused image of Mira and Kenji, her lips parted in a laugh, his hand resting on the small of her back. A still shot, but it screamed louder than anything said that morning. Gerald hadn't moved from the spot where I'd handed him the report. Iris sat perched on the armrest like a bird too stunned to fly. Zara was by the door, clutching her purse like it was a flotation device on a sinking ship. And Mira was silent. Finally, I pressed play. The next video rolled. A new angle, this time from the parking garage below the hotel. Their car pulling in. Mira leaning over to kiss Kenji before stepping out, her hair tied up, sunglasses sliding down her nose as she adjusted her coat. The same coat I'd bought her last winter, the one she claimed was too plain to wear in public. She'd worn it for him. That detail, that small betrayal, hit deeper than I expected. Not because of the coat itself, but because of what it represented. Every compromise, every quiet humiliation I'd swallowed thinking it kept the peace. The video skipped forward, hotel elevator footage again. Kenji had his hand on the back of her neck now. Mira leaned in, whispering something just before the doors closed. I didn't need audio to know what kind of words they were. I'd lived long enough with Myra's performances to read her body like a script. Her flirtation was subtle, calculated, always dressed up in power. Behind me, I heard Iris whisper, "Oh my God." It wasn't loud. But in the stillness of that room, it may as well have been screamed. Zara muttered, "This is insane," as though the footage might rewrite itself if she objected hard enough. And then, Gerald, his voice, low but sharp, like gravel under a boot. "You embarrassed this family." The words landed hard. Mira looked up, eyes bloodshot now, her mouth working but no sound coming out. The last 30 minutes had peeled back every layer she had so carefully built for years. Her polish, her poise, her control. Gone. What was left now was just a woman standing in the wreckage of her own making, watching people who once adored her slowly step back. "Shut it off," Mira shouted suddenly, stepping forward as if she could grab the screen and tear it from the wall. I didn't move. I looked her in the eye and said, calmly, "You made the movie, Mira. I'm just screening it." She stopped short, breathing hard, jaw clenched. The facade had cracked completely now. Her hands were balled into fists. Her face was blotchy, streaked with the kind of panic that couldn't be camouflaged with charm or a carefully placed laugh. This wasn't some boardroom disagreement she could win with confidence. This was exposure, full and irreversible. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up a second envelope. Cream-colored, sealed in gold. I held it out to her. She hesitated. Then, with trembling fingers, she picked it up and broke the seal. She unfolded the contents slowly. Her eyes scanned the document, left to right, back again, and then lower. Her breath hitched when she reached the signature page. Her entire face dropped. "It's the finalized countersuit," I said before she could ask. "Filed 2 days ago. Grounds: adultery, fraud, breach of fiduciary trust." Myra's lips parted, but she said nothing. The document trembled in her hands now. This will ruin me." "No," I said. "This will define you." "The ruin part? That was all you." Gerald stood behind her, his face unreadable now, somewhere between rage and shame. He didn't speak, didn't defend her, just stared at the document like it confirmed everything he'd been trying not to believe. "I built this business with you," she said, her voice breaking. "I helped you. And then you tried to gut it behind my back," I replied. "You weaponized trust. You saw my silence as weakness." You thought I was too slow, too passive, too forgiving to fight back. You were wrong. She took a shaky breath and looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You planned all this. I nodded. Every piece. Her voice rose. So this was revenge? No, I said again, firmer this time. This was accountability. And then, softly, Merry Christmas. The phrase didn't land like hers had earlier that morning. Hers was laced with sarcasm, with cruelty and performance. Mine was clean, surgical, honest. A final note to close the curtain. Zara, still near the door, finally broke the silence with a scoff. You're both insane, she muttered, before storming out with the kind of urgency reserved for people who know they're next if they stay too long. Iris followed, mumbling something about needing air. Gerald hesitated, then stepped forward toward me, not Mira. His eyes locked on mine, cold and appraising. You're not the man I thought you were, he said. I know, I replied. That's how this all happened. He nodded once, then walked out without looking at his daughter. The door closed behind them. For the first time since that morning, Mira and I were alone. No applause. No witnesses. Just the two of us, surrounded by the wreckage of her well-orchestrated betrayal and my perfectly executed rebuttal. She sank into the chair behind her, still clutching the envelope, looking down at it like maybe it would vanish if she stared long enough. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt free. Because this wasn't vengeance. It was survival with a backbone. Strategy forged in silence. A reckoning dressed in wrapping paper and truth. I reached for my coat, already packed. There was nothing more to say. The storm had come. The truth had exploded. And I was walking out clean. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't stomp up the stairs like a child having a tantrum. That wasn't my style, and certainly not now, not after everything. No, I walked slowly and deliberately toward the hallway closet, the way someone does when they've made peace with a storm that has already passed. Each step felt like shedding a layer I didn't realize I'd been wearing. Years of silence, of endurance, of trying to hold together something Mira had been dismantling from the inside. I left all of that with every click of my heels on the polished hardwood floor. I opened the closet and pulled out the overnight bag I'd packed days ago. I had tucked it between winter coats and an old vacuum cleaner, zipped and ready. Mira never noticed it. She never noticed a lot of things about me until I made her look. Behind me, I heard the creak of the floor as she rose from the chair, slow and disoriented. Where are you going? She asked, her voice raw, cracking at the edges. I turned around, the bag strap looped over my shoulder. She looked smaller now, somehow. Not in stature, but in presence. Mira had always taken up space, filled rooms with her confidence, her curated grace. But this morning had shrunk her. Now she stood barefoot on the rug, wrapped in the remains of her arrogance and panic, holding the envelope like it might warm her. Somewhere peaceful, I said. My voice was calm, even. Not cruel. I didn't need to be cruel. I had already won. She took a step forward. You're just leaving? The deed is done, I said, nodding toward the living room. Literally. I can't believe you do this, she said, but the force in her words was gone. It was like watching someone try to build a wall with wet paper. You believed I was weak, I said simply. You believed I'd never push back? That was your mistake. She scoffed, reaching for something, anything, that would reverse this. You think this makes you noble? No, I said. It makes me free. I walked past her toward the front door, my hand brushing the edge of the table where she'd once laid out place cards for family dinners like it was a gala. Everything in this house had always been about performance. Hosting. Appearing perfect. Even our marriage became part of her brand. Jonah, the supportive husband in the background, the tech mind behind the scenes. Only now, the curtain had dropped, and there was no audience left to clap for her. Jonah, wait, she called after me. I stopped, turned to face her one last time. By the way, I said, my voice quieter now, the prenup. It had a fidelity clause. Her brow furrowed. You forgot about that, didn't you? I continued. It was buried in the back. Gerald insisted on it. Actually, back when he thought I was the one who'd need controlling. Her face went slack. I stepped forward just enough to watch the understanding hit her. You forfeit everything. The house, the accounts, even your stake in the company. All void. You don't walk away with $1. Her lips parted like she wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't write the clause, I said, but I honored it. You didn't. She looked like she might collapse. You tricked me. No, I said, firm now. You tricked yourself. I just watched. Her voice hitched again, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I had cared for years, cared through every dinner where she cut me off mid-sentence, every event where she introduced me as the guy who keeps my apps working, every cold night she came home late with excuses that always sounded rehearsed. I had cared when it mattered. But love without respect dies in silence. And mine had died long before today. I opened the door. Outside, the morning was bright, crisp, that winter kind of clean. The frost on the driveway sparkled like a warning and a blessing. I stepped out and let the cold hit my skin. It didn't hurt. It revived. Behind me, she screamed. Finally. It came from somewhere deep in her chest, a sound of unraveling. Rage and regret mixed in one broken wail. I didn't turn around. That scream wasn't mine to answer anymore. I walked to my car, slid the bag into the passenger seat, and started the engine. The driveway looked different now. This house, once a monument to everything I thought I was building with her, now looked like someone else's stage. A prop. A trap. And I was done playing a part. As I pulled out, I saw the curtain shift. A silhouette in the window mirror, watching me leave. Still clutching the envelope. Still stunned. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I didn't offer any last-minute word to soften the blow. There was nothing left to say. What was the phrase she used earlier? Oh, right. Merry Christmas. Mine came wrapped in exit clauses and notarized signatures. And this time, I was the one giving the surprise. The city stretched ahead, traffic light, roads clear. My phone buzzed once, my lawyer, no doubt, confirming receipt. I ignored it for now. I didn't need to hear anything else. My part in this story was done. The performance was over. The lights were out. All that was left was peace. I didn't drive far. I didn't need to. Just far enough to feel the air change, to feel my chest expand without the weight of pretending. A cabin waited for me about an hour out, quiet, surrounded by trees, untouched by Myra's fingerprints or her family's opinions. It was already stocked with groceries, firewood, and silence. I would sleep there tonight. I would wake up tomorrow and not hear her voice in my head. I would not wait for the next betrayal. I would sit with the truth I finally spoke and let it echo through the space she never thought I'd claim as my own. I was done being the husband in the shadows. Now, I was just a man who walked away on his own terms. And peace? Peace never screamed. Peace didn't throw tantrums or clap in unison. Peace just was. And it looked damn good from the rearview mirror. The cabin was exactly as I'd left it, modest, quiet, surrounded by towering firs and the hush of wind passing through bare winter branches. There was a dusting of snow on the roof, clean and untouched, like the whole place had been holding its breath, waiting for me to return. I parked the car, stepped out, and stood for a moment with the engine ticking behind me. No voices, no judgment, no clinking glasses or forced laughter or backhanded compliments disguised as holiday cheer. Just stillness, honest and cold and welcome. I carried the overnight bag inside, shutting the door behind me with a soft click. The air inside was cool but not freezing, the kind of chill that welcomed fire. I lit the hearth first, the sound of the flame catching on dry kindling soothing in its simplicity. No politics here. No lies. Just fire doing what it was meant to do. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I let it ring the first time. I knew who it was. Renee Dabbery, my attorney, didn't usually call unless something needed to be said. By the second buzz, I picked up. Jonah, she said without preamble. Her tone clipped but pleased. Everything went perfectly. I leaned against the edge of the counter. I know, I said. I saw it play out. You expected fireworks, but that was a demolition, she said. She didn't even try to deny the footage. There's no denying what's already lit, I replied, watching the fire spread across the logs. Renee chuckled. Your accounts are secure. The ownership transfer's held up. And we've already submitted Kenji's name to the board with supporting evidence. The audit will do the rest. I ran a hand over my jaw. How long until it hits the industry? By tomorrow morning, most of the tech sector in the city will know Mira Thorne is out at her own company. Correction, I said. My company. She hummed in agreement. There's one more thing. I raised an eyebrow even though she couldn't see it. Yeah, Kenji Morales was arrested this morning. That made me straighten. Seriously. Tax fraud, she confirmed. Turns out our accountant had been doctoring more than just her company's books. He's been skimming from at least 3 other firms. Someone else flagged him. You just beat them to the fire with your complaint. I couldn't help it. I smiled. Not a big one. Just enough to feel it. A small, earned expression. The kind that feels like closure. Turns out betrayal isn't deductible, I said. She laughed. You're colder than I thought, Wells. Not cold, I said. Just clear. We ended the call shortly after. No small talk. No reassurances. Renee didn't do fluff, and I appreciated her for that. She was the kind of person who handled facts, who moved quietly but efficiently. And now, she had helped me reset the scales. I walked into the living room and dropped onto the old leather couch, my body sinking into it like it was built to hold men unraveling from battles no one else could see. The fire warmed the space gradually, casting flickers of gold across the floorboards. I kicked off my shoes, leaned my head back, and stared at the wooden beams above. Mira had been many things. Brilliant, beautiful, ambitious to a fault. But somewhere along the way, she'd lost sight of the difference between building something and simply using someone else's foundation to climb higher. She didn't just cheat on me. She tried to erase me. Tried to cut my signature off the life I helped build so she could paste hers over it like I'd never mattered. But she forgot the first rule of any game built on illusion. The house always wins. And I was the house. I had paid the bills. I had written the code. I had signed every dotted line that got us those contracts in the first place. I had stayed up nights solving problems while she smiled for cameras and delivered keynote speeches at conferences we only got invited to because of our system's efficiency, my system. I was the ghostwriter of her spotlight. But ghosts can haunt when provoked. I pulled out my laptop, opened the lid, and tapped into the secure drive. There was still cleanup to do. Clients to notify. Partners to inform. I wasn't going to burn everything down. This wasn't scorched earth. This was pruning. Careful and necessary. I would rebuild the company with a sharper edge. No more shared leadership. No more blurred lines. Just results. After 30 minutes of drafting emails and forwarding documents to my assistant, I closed the laptop and sat back. The fire had consumed most of the first log. I added another, listening to the quiet crackle and pop, feeling it push back the cold air inch by inch. My phone buzzed again, but this time, I ignored it. No part of me needed to hear Myra's voice. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. She'd try to spin the story, I knew that. She'd call friends, tell them I ambushed her, painted her into a corner. But the footage didn't lie. The signatures were hers. The timing was hers. I simply accelerated the ending she'd already set in motion. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a drink, bourbon, neat, and stood by the window. Outside, the snow was beginning to fall again. Light, delicate flakes catching the moonlight. It was so still, so opposite of what I'd left behind just hours earlier. No echo of raised voices. No shattered illusions or scathing glares. Just wind and snow and the kind of silence that doesn't ask anything of you. I lifted the glass in a quiet toast. To no one. No revenge. No audience. Just a man and the truth. I had always been the quiet one. The one who didn't fight back because he thought love meant swallowing pride. But what I learned was that peace isn't something you wait to be handed. It's something you build. Deliberately, unapologetically. And when someone threatens it, you protect it. Even if that means walking away from everything you once thought was home. I took a slow sip, let the burn settle in my chest, and finally allowed myself to smile. I didn't need applause. I didn't need an apology. I didn't even need closure from Mira. What I needed was already mine again. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I would wake up in this cabin, make coffee, and start rebuilding. Not from scratch. Just from truth. And truth always has a way of surviving the storm. It snowed that night, soft and slow, blanketing the cabin roof and the tree branches like the sky was laying a clean sheet over everything. I didn't turn the TV on. Didn't check the news. Didn't reach for my phone, which still sat face down on the kitchen counter, silent and forgotten. For the first time in years, I didn't feel compelled to respond. There was nothing urgent to manage. Nothing to repair. Nothing to prove. I sat by the fireplace, legs stretched out, glass in hand, and just listened to the creak of the walls, to the occasional thud of snow sliding off the eaves, to the hush that comes when you finally stop performing for people who only ever wanted to see you lose. That silence? That was peace. And it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Outside, the world kept turning. Emails would get sent. Calls would be made. Mira would scramble to salvage what she could of her image, her contacts, her control. The board would meet without her. The story would spread, polite in some circles, vicious in others. The woman who thought she could orchestrate a public execution was now the subject of one far more quiet and complete. But none of that belonged to me anymore. Inside this cabin, there was no judgment, no manipulation, no applause or betrayal. Just breath, just warmth, just the man I still was beneath all the roles they tried to bury me under. I rose and opened the back door, stepping out onto the small wooden deck. The air was sharp with cold, but invigorating. The snow crunched under my socks, but I didn't care. Above me, the sky was wide open, no city glow, no noise, just a stretch of stars watching over everything. I took a deep breath, letting the cold fill my lungs, then slowly let it go. I thought about Mira not with anger now, but with clarity. She didn't destroy me. She simply revealed herself. And I responded, not with rage, but with strategy. That's the part no one sees. The quiet men. The steady ones. We don't shout when we're hurt. We study. We learn. And then we act with precision. She gave me divorce papers. I gave her consequences. There's a difference between pain and justice. What I'd done wasn't vengeance. It was redefinition. I had rewritten the script she tried to hand me and turned the final page before she even realized the chapter was ending. And now, there was no one left to interrupt me. No one else's voice climbing over mine. I was alone, yes, but not lonely. That was the difference. I stepped back inside, rubbed my hands near the fire, and smiled to myself. A real smile. Not the kind I wore at board meetings, not the tight-lipped one at family dinners, or when Mira made one of her public jabs. This smile was mine. Small, solid, unapologetic. There would be other seasons, other days with new stories. But this one, this moment, it was mine. No compromises, no background role. Just me, finally seen, even if only by the man in the mirror. And you know what? Peace looks good on me.